Buenas noches, clase. I'm going to talk a little bit about grammar and how to make a complete sentence. To make a complete sentence, we need a subject, which is a person, a place, or a thing. And we also need a verb, which is the action word. The subject is doing the action. In Spanish and in English, there are two kinds of verbs. In Spanish, any verb, not noun, verb that ends in R is called an infinitive. And Spanish has three kinds of infinitive verbs: AR verbs, ER verbs, and IR verbs. English only has one kind of infinitive: to eat, to run, to jump. Infinitives are not conjugated verbs. They don't have a regular verb ending. They end with AR. For example, I need to sleep. I need is the conjugated verb because it tells who is doing the action. It's I. To sleep is the conjugated verb, and it's called, to sleep is an infinitive. It is not conjugated. In English, all infinitives are to run, to jump, to eat. Now I want to go over the subject pronouns in Spanish. So I'm going to go over here, and we're going to start with singular subject pronouns. I is one person. It's the first person. When you use I in a sentence, you are talking about one person, and it is yourself. Second person is you. Singular. When you are talking to someone, you say you. And third person in English is he, she, it. In Spanish, third person singular is he, she, it, the ball. For example, today we learned la pelota. And usted, you. Now, when you begin to include someone else in your sentence, you then have plurals. So the plural, someone else and I, in English is we. And the plural, someone else and you, in English is y'all. And if you remember, we are not going to learn the vosotros form of the verb. Not this year, anyway. And when more than one person that you're talking about doing the action, he becomes they in English, she is also they in English, and you is y'all. However, in English, all of you is second person. In Spanish, you formal and all of you all, the one we're going to learn this year, is third person plural. Now, what I would like to ask is that you spend a moment looking at this activity and see if you can write the subject pronouns in Spanish. How do you say in Spanish, I? How do you say you when I'm talking to you and I call you by your first name? How do you say he or she? How do you say you when I call you by a title, Mr. or Mrs.? How do you say we or we if it's only girls? How do you say they, and y'all? Now, the reality is all of the answers are in the next section. So I hope you stop the video for a moment, take a moment, and try to complete each of these subject pronouns in Spanish. Okay, now I have 2 verbs conjugated for you, and I have 2 sample verbs here that are not conjugated. I would like to ask that you study these verb endings that go with I, which is yo, and you. I call you by your first name, tú. He, él, she, ella, and you, Mr. or Mrs., usted. The way to say we in Spanish is nosotros, unless it's only girls. So Carolina and I would say nosotras. And they, and all of y'all. Please note, this AR verb has o, us, amos, and on for the verb endings. But when we go down to an ER verb, the O, us changes to an E. O, ace, a, amos, and N. We've talked in the past about how to conjugate a verb. You drop off the ER or you drop off the AR, and you memorize these 5 endings. O, us, amos, on. O, ace, a, amos, N. We briefly discussed today what is the difference between verb endings for ER verbs and IR verbs. And I have an explanation here. IR verbs, the only change from ER verbs is nosotros, is IMOS. Please review this information. Do not fret over it. We're going to play a game next week where we use our vocabulary words describing people's hair color, pelo rubio, pelo negro. Make sure you review your colors. And a basic vocabulary, shy, tímido, tímida, nervous, nervioso, nerviosa, etc. Hasta luego, clase. Nos vemos.